Good morning. I want to pick up a comment by Brendan McNamara, who says, I was amused by your binning of Zoom many years ago on a trip to from Singapore to Dubai. I happened to be sat in the middle of high-power people. On my left were two gentlemen. I asked if they'd been on holiday. No, was the reply. We've just been to a conference in Singapore. It was about communicating in cyberspace. On my right side, when asked, they told me they'd been studying the shaman for 3 years all over Indonesia. When they asked what I was using, I showed them an old phone, a little pencil, and a little notebook. And they were highly amused. And how long have you been doing this? I told them, apart from the phone, I said 65 years. They were astonished, but great fun followed. Well, I'm I am equally entertained by this idea, and I don't think I've really got major problems with Zoom except for its outage. I tend to use a thing called eCam, and I find that often much better. Zoom exports quite a small image, and for YouTubing, for publishing material on the web, Zoom isn't ideal in any way. But it has hitherto been quite a reliable platform. But over the last decade, remote communication tools have revolutionized the way we meet, teach, and socialize. Well, I presume socialize. I tend not to do very much of that. Yet beneath this convenience lies a range of structural, technical, and ethical disadvantages that are often overlooked. So, just taking these three: Zoom, Skype, which I miss, and WhatsApp, which I was a very reluctant user of, partly because it sort of pings all the time. So I have a critical lens. I can try and be as evidence based as possible. Zoom uses a thing called dynamic bit rate adjustment, which attempts to maintain stability by lowering resolution and frame rate when internet bandwidth fluctuates. This is efficient, but it produces audio-visual desynchronization, jitter, and a loss of fidelity, particularly problematic in professional settings such as live interpretation, music teaching, or courtroom hearings where precision of timing matters. A 2024 Ofcom study found that packet loss above 1.5% results in perceptible speech clipping on Zoom, a threshold easily exceeded on domestic bandwidth broadband during peak hours. So although Zoom now employs AES 256 GCM encryption, data is still routed through multiple servers, occasionally outside the user's jurisdiction. In 2020, the company admitted that some encryption keys were generated by Chinese servers, raising concerns about data sovereignty and state interception. Unlike end-to-end encrypted platforms, Zoom's encryption is transport layer only, meaning the company itself can technically access meeting data for compliance or analysis. Stanford's Virtual Human Interaction Lab identified Zoom fatigue as a measurable psychological strain caused by constant self-view, limited non-verbal cues, and the unnatural proximity of multiple faces on screen. The forced maintenance of eye contact at close digital distance increases amygdala activation associated with social anxiety. This is a design flaw, not merely a cultural phenomenon. And out of the three, Meets and Teams and Zoom, I infinitely prefer Zoom. I find the other Teams and Meets or whatever it is, I find them intensely irritating, and I'm not really sure why. That's just my personal taste, I suspect, because they do the same sort of thing. Skype, originally built on peer-to-peer architecture, was efficient in the early 2000s, and I was onto it very quickly and using it to teach from a very early date, but after Microsoft's acquisition in 2011, it was re-engineered into a cloud-based service, layering old P2P protocols on top of a modern Azure infrastructure, and the hybrid model resulted in excessive latency and unpredictable data routing. And according to independent network tests, Skype began to exhibit an average round-trip delay of 180 milliseconds compared to Zoom's 120 and Google Meet's 95. Skype's attempt to integrate with Microsoft Teams has been technically inconsistent. Authentication conflicts between Skype ID and Microsoft 365 accounts frequently cause SIP protocol errors, and the result is a higher instance of failed call connections, particularly in institutional environments. Moreover, Skype's reliance on UDP ports often clashes with university or government firewalls, producing one-way audio or total connection drops. Skype's end-to-end encryption, introduced in 2018, is not default and available only in private conversations. Metadata, including contact lists and timestamps, remains visible to Microsoft, allowing behavioral and analytics and potential law enforcement access under US Cloud Act provisions. This undermines confidentiality and professional diplomatic use, but it certainly has, in my mind, the best system of recording what you've done of any of the various systems available. Zoom, whatever chat you have, disappears the moment the call is over, and it's very difficult to, with hindsight, to go back and see what calls you've had, and WhatsApp. Well, WhatsApp, things just disappear every so often. WhatsApp uses the Signal protocol, which is robust, yet while messages are encrypted, metadata is not. So Facebook, that's Meta, retains information on message frequency, contact networks, and device identifiers. This allows social graph profiling, the mapping of personal relationships, which can be exploited for advertising or intelligence purposes. In 2021, Apple's App Privacy Report showed that WhatsApp transmitted more third-party data than Signal or Telegram combined. Security researchers at Ruhr University demonstrated that WhatsApp's group encryption is susceptible to rogue administrator attacks, allowing unauthorized users with server access to insert themselves into a group without participants being notified. And although patched, this flaw illustrates how centralized server control undermines the very principle of end-to-end security. WhatsApp backups on iCloud or Google Drive are not encrypted, and users therefore unknowingly store decrypted copies of their conversations on third-party servers, exposing them to subpoenas, data leaks, or insider breaches. And WhatsApp image compression algorithm causes a loss of EXIF metadata, which can be critical in forensic or journalistic documentation. All three platforms participate in telemetry collection, that's tracking device data, operating system, and engagement metrics. And the commodification of behavior raises ethical concerns about consent and user autonomy. Each application presupposes stable broadband and modern hardware. In many rural or developing contexts, high latency and packet loss effectively exclude participants. Digital inclusion thus becomes a structural inequality reinforced by software design optimized for high bandwidth users. Technical compression of speech and delay cause turn-taking disruption, leading to cross-cultural misunderstandings in international meetings. Conversation analysis studies show a 300 millisecond delay can halve perceived empathy between people who are engaged in some sort of conversation, a subtle but a profound socio-linguistic effect. So Zoom, Skype and WhatsApp have enabled global communication at minimal cost. That's a plus. Yet each carries deep disadvantages rooted in its digital architecture, its encryption, its philosophy, and its user psychology. They exemplify the paradox of digital communication. The faster and cheaper the connection, the more fragile and exploitable the human exchange becomes. True progress will require not only better code, but an ethical commitment to privacy, transparency, and digital well-being. And that is definitely not being met at the moment by these platforms, and the obsession with digital, with privacy that you find with Teams and Meet undermines their value from my point of view. But I'd be really interested to know whether you find Teams, Meet, Zoom, WhatsApp of value today, and what you recommend, and why. Because this is clearly the future of our communication is going to be dependent on this sort of system, and at the moment it's not right. It's not right at all.